So before I get into this video, I just wanted to address the issue surrounding YouTube comments. So on the last video, something happened that has never happened before, and comments were automatically switched off, which was weird. Then they were manually switched back on, only for them to be switched off again. This has happened repeatedly. It's gone back and forth. I then came across other channels covering the exact same issue, and they had the same thing. So my first thought was, well, YouTube is obviously censoring comments. But now I've seen more and more people face the same issue despite not making political content. And YouTube has responded to these people who have complained by saying that any comments that are deemed harmful under the algorithm on videos that are selected as appropriate for kids will have comments turned off. Now, obviously, many have responded by saying, well, they didn't make their videos listed as for kids, and obviously same as videos on this channel. So I think it's a bug where YouTube has obviously changed the algorithm. They probably changed it last night, and now it's sort of overcorrected and it's spilled into videos that aren't made for kids. But I just wanted to let you know that comments will probably be switched off for the foreseeable future until the problem is fixed. Now, this channel never censors or deletes comments. Now, pretty much every single video, someone will say, why are you deleting comments? Turn Left doesn't censor comments, only if it's abuse, which is incredibly rare. So, I don't know, if you have a different opinion, you should be allowed to express that. But anyway, I just wanted to clarify all of that. Let's get into the video. So Andrew Neil, who set up GB News to only leave a few days later, spoke at Parliament before a House of Lords Communications and Digital Committee on the topic of GB News. Now, Neil didn't hold back and made some criticisms of the channel and Ofcom, and he's right about some of the stuff and very wrong about others. But here's a clip.
I'm surprised how tolerant Ofcom has been of GB News. I think it may be because Ofcom knows that the rest of the broadcast universe is on the centre-left, bit more left band, and so it gave GB News a bit more leeway to try and settle down. I am surprised that any regulator would allow politicians sitting in the House of Parliament to present TV programmes, political TV programmes. I mean, if I had stayed as chairman, it would never have happened because I would not have had any politician present a television show in the first place. And I would certainly never have allowed politicians to interview other politicians from the same party. I mean, I just find that incredible. And I think on these areas, Ofcom needs to find a backbone.
It is insane to me that GB News platforms sitting MPs, mostly Tory, to host shows and then often interview other Tories. I mean, Lee Anderson had one, Jacob Rees-Mogg has one, which is clearly anti-democratic, and Andrew Neil is bang on about that. The whole point of the media is to hold power to account. Now, we know the mainstream media doesn't do that. The media have an extremely close relationship with power. There's a revolving door between the government and the BBC. The Spectator, in which Andrew Neil is the chairman, hosts garden parties with the political establishment. So the media doesn't function as it's supposed to. But it's got to the point where they're not even hiding it anymore, and Neil is correct in pointing this out. He's also correct about Ofcom not having a backbone and pretty much allowing GB News to get away with so much. However, yes, GB News is the obvious culprit, but we can't pretend they're the only ones. What about David Lammy on LBC? What about Ed Balls, who, yes, is no longer an MP, but has got his own show on GMB, and he's interviewing fellow Labour right figures on politics? That isn't scrutiny. What about George Osborne, after his policies killed 330,000 people with austerity, stepped down as Chancellor and walked straight into the Observer? So Andrew Neil is in no position to make these observations because he's part of the problem. Now, I already mentioned how much the Spectator sucks up to the establishment. Now, Neil also attacked GB News for its conspiracism. What I didn't want it to become, I could see it was happening, which is why I left almost immediately, was an outlet for bizarre conspiracy theories or anti-vaxxers, or basically the nutty end of politics, said Mr. Neil. But Andrew Neil created GB News. I mean, he did it because he wanted to move the debate to the right. Now, in that very clip, which you just watched, Neil incorrectly says that most of the media are centre-left. What, like The Telegraph? The Spectator, that has literally platformed Nazi arguments? What about The Times, where I recently covered Matthew Parris, who wrote a comment in The Times saying eugenics is okay? We've got The Sun, we've got The Express, we've got the Daily Mail. The only so-called left-of-centre papers we have are The Mirror and The Guardian. And The Guardian doesn't even act left of centre. And The Mirror isn't left-wing or centre-left. It's just a Labour supporting paper, regardless of who the leader is. So there is an overwhelming right-wing bias in our media. And Neil looked at the media landscape and thought, oh, we need to be even more right-wing. And all of the conspiracy and cultural nonsense that comes out of GB News, which Neil admonished, I would say it's his fault. Because if you already have a very right-wing mediascape and then you wanted a right-wing alternative, well, where is it naturally going to end up? It's going to be culture wars. It's going to be conspiracism. The political debate had nowhere else to go. Now, he says the reason why he left was because of the editorial of GB News being nutty. But is that why he left? I don't think so. I think he left because he knew it was a failure. I remember at the time when it launched, the lack of professionalism, despite having a huge budget to begin with. It was funded by multiple hedge funds to the tune of £60 million, hardly a People's channel. And it couldn't get the lighting right. There were so many technical hiccups. It was an embarrassment. And I think Neil knew that GB News was a laughingstock and just jumped ship. Now, the following from him, though, is completely correct. Noting that Fox News caters well to the bigger market for that in America, he continued, there's no market for that in Britain beyond a hardcore of nutters. He added, I'm quite surprised GB News has survived as long as it is. And I'm even more surprised it saw off Talk TV. I actually thought Talk TV might do real damage to GB News because it did have better production values and it wasn't so conspiracy theory. It did lean to the right, but it had a variety of opinions that weren't all to the right. To my surprise, GB News has found a niche for itself, but it's not a very big niche, and it's not a niche that can ever be profitable. So, I mean, he's right. The anti-vax, conspiracism, and extreme cultural nonsense doesn't appeal to the British people. That works in the US with a market of 300 million, but over here with a measly 65 million, there clearly isn't a huge sector of people who are hungry for this content. Most people don't care about culture wars. Most people don't care about trans issues. Most people care about their material needs. Now, that is obviously the case everywhere, but with the US, there's a huge section of the population that takes culture wars seriously, and that's because it has been a long time in the making. You still have mainstream Republican politicians who are anti-abortion. Some have come out and said women shouldn't vote. There is a link between ultra-conservatism and fundamentalist Christianity. There is a base for this type of politics, which has been incorporated in the GOP since, well, forever. We're not so religious, and even those who are, I think we're all quite secular in our behaviour. I mean, when it comes to religion, it's personal here. That's not to say that this type of politics will never become big or that I'm not worried about it. It's just that right now it's not as relevant, which is why GB News is a failure. Meanwhile, GB News announced its first major round of redundancy cuts last week after its operating accounts for the year to May 2023 showed an operating loss of 42.4 million. Annual Companies House accounts for GB News Limited show 80% year-on-year growth in revenue to 6.7 million, but also a 63% growth in cost of sales as the broadcaster has continued to expand. In May 2023, GB News had 295 staff versus 175 in May 2022. The latest figures mean GB News investors have shouldered total losses of £76 million since the channel launched in 2021. In the financial year to May 2021, as it was preparing to launch, its losses were £3 million. In the year to May 2022, GB News reported losses 10 times greater than revenue, £31 million versus 2.97 million. In the last financial year, losses were instead 6 times greater. GB News hasn't just failed to break even, it's been at a loss since its creation. Now, I don't want to make this whole thing just about GB News, which is what many will take from Andrew Neil's recent comments, because our entire media is fundamentally broken, and GB News isn't the exception, it's the rule. It certainly looks different, but it's just an outgrowth of a media that listens to internal Westminster politicking, cozying up to the establishment, and ignoring the real material needs of people in this country. In a way, GB News was inevitable. Without Andrew Neil, someone else with a lot of money would have launched a similar platform. Because of a lack of real discussion about the issues that face people in this country and around the world, then it's hard to see how some other rich person wouldn't have attempted this. So anyone in the media critical of GB News, despite deserving it, needs some introspection too, and that certainly goes for Andrew Neil. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and drop a comment. It's good for the algorithm and I'm interested in what you have to say. If you're not already subscribed, please do and hit the notification bell. You can also support this channel by becoming a member for 99p per month. And if you're feeling a little more generous, then you can support us on Patreon for £3 or £5 per month. This channel for a while has been uploading every single day, and it's quite a lot of work that is still voluntary and scheduled around my paid work. But I have so much ambition, expect in the future to see more variety in content, such as interviews and Vox Pops. But I want this to be a fully fledged media organisation where not only is this my full-time job, but to have multiple people working for Turn Left. I like to see a live show in the future, more content that delves into culture, history, and much more. But that can only be done if there's money. So please, if you can, support us in any way that's in your capacity. And thank you to existing members, subscribers, and patrons. See you next time.